Our first presenter is Ahmed Tahsin from Indiana University with a paper titled Silent Flutters, Bridging Human and Non-Human Worlds in Non-Fiction Visual Art.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for being here today. Welcome to this panel, Environmental Aesthetics. And as you can see, the title of my paper is Silent Flutters. And I changed a little bit, just added eco-aesthetics, aligning with the panel's title as well. And kind of, I changed the route as well, the way I was looking at this paper. Not only about bridging human and non-human worlds, but I'm particularly focusing on through certain lenses and through certain frameworks on the aestheticization of environment in visual arts particularly. So when I'm saying visual arts, it's not only non-fiction visual arts definitely, but I do not only mean cinema or documentary. I kind of broadened it so that I can fit in the ways in which these aesthetics are at play in whether performance art, whether installation or screen-based installation. So it's not only documentary or non-fiction as it suggests, elaborating the genre before I begin. So it kind of fits in to multiple kind of artifacts that I'll be looking at, and I'll share 3 particular artifacts as an example today. But before I begin, I should just give a little heads up what I'm looking at and what kind of framework I'm looking at when I'm looking at these 3 kind of examples. First of all, I'm trying to reframe audiovisual aesthetics. And this paper offers a comprehensive framework for reimagining human relationships with the ecological other. Now, when I'm saying the other, I'll define it, what do I mean by ecological other? And through identifying the creative approaches we see in non-fiction visual arts, this paper collectively address the limitations we have on anthropocentric narratives. And this paper proposes if there can be an alternative mode of perception, interaction, and representation. So not only I'm looking at representation, but perception, interaction, and representation, which can prioritize ethical and also ontological, along with a sensory engagement with the environment, if it is possible at all or not. So as the Anthropocene forces us to think or rethink that, where do we fit in as Homo sapiens, like our place within the biosphere? So these aesthetics, the way I'm framing it, provide those critical tools for cultivating an eco-consciousness. And that is both imaginative and actionable. And as I said, the way I'm framing it, 3 kind of categories you can see here. First of all, what do I mean by onto-ecological aesthetics? What do I mean by eco-quantum aesthetics in this case? And what is non-sense aesthetics? And that's what the whole paper will be focusing at through 3 particular kind of different generic, non-fiction visual arts, but different generic artifacts. So the Anthropocene, so just giving a little rationale why I'm choosing this framework to look at. The Anthropocene epoch demands our collective imagination's capability to comprehend the scale of ecological crisis. The challenge lies in registering these changes, not just through scientific instruments, but in our imaginations. And before any sort of other mediations, I personally believe that the most sensitive of all devices is our imagination. That's where it is mediated at first. And then we can talk about how camera as an apparatus and other extraction, how that plays a role in the environment and climate, how camera crews or film also can be a complicit, quote unquote, crime, if it's a crime, like in the environmental degradation, that's what you're talking about. So So that's a very later stage. But the first is the way we imagine, and the mediation happens here first. And then through different apparatus, it can be exercised. So art definitely can speak louder than volumes of scientific data, engaging the public's imagination immediately. So this dynamic leads to a tendency to conceptualize the environment as something we think about, rather than something we directly experience. So that kind of makes a distance, something we think about and something we can directly experience. And thereby, this intellectualization creates a gap in perception, distancing individuals from their natural surroundings. Conventional images of climate change, like polar bears, melting ice, flooded cities, these have become so common that they risk turning environment into an abstract concept rather than a lived reality. Such sort of representation alienates human from nature, complicating human responses to environmental crisis. And that brings to light this question: how can visual arts offer different ways of imagining and imaging, if I use the word image as a verb here, environment and ecology? So how we can imagine and image environment and ecology that can activate more than my limited human senses. I have limitation on my senses, the 5 senses that I have. And how can art speak to those beyond those limitations? And the purpose is so that we can experience the environment. And to give a little clarification of these terms, first one, as I said, is onto-ecological aesthetics, for which I have chosen Lamont Young's composition number 5, 1960, which is at MoMA, Museum of Modern Arts in New York. This aesthetics begins with, we'll see those artifacts as well, just giving a little clarification of the terms. So this aesthetics begins with an ethical and philosophical grounding, asking how we can recognize the other as independent and autonomous, not from humanistic lenses. So there comes the critical obstacle or point, how we can disassociate ourselves from, while looking at the other, not from my lens, not from a Homo sapien lens. And there comes the problem and how it has been solved or addressed in visual arts. And I won't use the word solved. Rather, it has been addressed. That's a better way to frame it. So how so let's say how we can recognize the other as an autonomous entity, while reframing human responsibility and humility within ecological systems. And for this argument, my case study is, as I said, Lamont Young's composition number 5. The second one, I'm saying eco-quantum aesthetics. And I have chosen the artifact Abbas Kiarostami's experimental film, 5, dedicated to Ozu. It's one of his rare watched films. I mean, Abbas Kiarostami is so famous, but this one is I hardly heard people talking about 5 dedicated to Ozu. And the reason I have chosen it, it kind of addresses those epistemological and ontological both questions. What exists and how do I know that it exists? So how this film talks about it and how it challenges of perceiving ecological phenomena that kind of operate at scales and complexities beyond human cognition. By drawing from quantum physics and the concept of entanglement, how in quantum physics matter and meaning are entangled, and it's not an interaction but intra-action, a relationship that kind of define each other, and how that is spoken in this film. We'll talk about that. It reveals how matter and meaning are co-constitutive, and it destabilizes traditional binaries like subject and object, human and non-human, and that's why this angle gives a frame to understand non-human as well. So this aesthetics focuses on how entanglements and indeterminacies at the quantum level reflect broader ecological realities and challenge human-centric ways of knowing. And as I said, for this purpose, I have chosen Abbas Kiarostami's times 5. And the third one is non-sense aesthetics, by which I do not mean at all lack of sense, by which I mean an aesthetic framework that challenges conventional sensory and cognitive paradigms. It kind of critiques dominant modes of meaning making. It emphasizes, can we have an alternative pathway through materiality, relationality, and effect? So that's how the question of senses come, because there's a limitation of senses as well as a human. Definitely, my eyes do not function like a bat's eyes, right? So there are so many non-human entities, I cannot smell like a dog can. So I have a lot of sensory limitations to perceive my surrounding and how that works. So moving on, the first case is ontological aesthetics, and for which I have chosen Lamont-Young's Composition 5, 1960. And the three artifacts I have chosen, they kind of travel through different times. Like this is 1960, then Abbas Kiarostami's film is 2003. And the third example that I've chosen is called contemporary, very contemporary. So let's have a look at this artifact and how was this performance staged. So it's very interesting. You can see, so let's say I come here with some butterflies, and I titled it, now Lamont is so famous, and everyone came there to listen to the composition, music. And he opened the box. I guess, any of you know about this, by the way?
No.
Okay, nice. So I'll just explain a little bit. And then you open the butterflies, the windows are closed. They were trying to get out. And then you open the window at a certain point, and butterflies just leave, that's it. And the performance stopped, finished. And then someone complained, where is the music? It should be audible. So I came here to listen to music. And that's when Lamont replied. So I'll just read it out loud. A performer turns a butterfly loose in the performance area when someone named Diana objected to calling this piece music, since one ought to be able to hear the sounds. And Young responded by saying it. I said that this was the usual attitude of human beings, that everything in the world should exist for them. And I disagreed. I said it didn't seem to me at all necessary that anyone or anything should have to hear sounds, that it is enough that they exist for themselves. So this is what is bringing us the crisis of imagination, as I started. So we have a crisis of imagination in that case. We think everything exists for myself, and that's what has been critiqued. So what do we get from here? Why I'm saying it is as an ontological aesthetics. It reorients our understanding of the world by decentering the human perspective. And it prioritizes the autonomy of non-human entities. It interrogates anthropocentric models of cognition and interaction. It offers instead an ethical and relational framework, which is deeply rooted in a philosophy by Levinas. So Levinasian philosophy is also, it's, as an adjective, it has been used like Levinasian, as you can see on the right side of the screen, inspired by Levinasian ethics, that true cognition involves a relation with the infinite that respects the alterity of the other. And that's why in the beginning, as I said, I used the word other, ecology as an other, because it's a different language, it's a different world, and how human kind of comprehend and connects with that, and how this has been approached and addressed in artifacts that I'm looking at. So Lamont-Young's composition, it embodies this ethos perfectly. In this performance, butterflies are released into the performance space. We got it. They exist independently. And the most interesting thing is human intervention is not needed. That's the key. Human cues are not needed. or human observation is, I would say, not even needed. Who is observing and who's not, that doesn't matter in this case. So this simple yet profound act, it decentralizes the whole human agent or human agency. And it foregrounds the autonomy of these beings, or let's say delicate beings, if I say delicate. The butterfly's flight affirms their existence as subjects in their own right, unbound by human perception or control. And the butterflies, these movements, illustrate the vast distributed systems that defy neat binaries of subject and object. Their flight aligns with Morton's concept of hyper-object. Hyper-object as in the black hole is a hyper-object, climate is a hyper-object, something that is beyond human cognition and language is not enough to convey. So that is what hyper-object. And these entities, I mean, by definition, hyper-objects kind of outscale and outlast human comprehension. As I said, it dissolves this performance that I just have 5 minutes left. Nice. Anthropocentric boundaries. So it's not transcendence. It's called subscendence that theorist Timothy Morton has said, a way of being that resists the fantasy of mastery and total understanding. So we will not understand, and that's okay, and to live with it. That is what also Dana Haraway called staying with the trouble while addressing Anthropocene. I got to cut short time, so I'll just jump a little bit. 5 dedicated to Ozu is, let me show you just a clip so that it becomes very clear what the film is doing. So 436. This is a character here, by the way.
The piece of wood is a character.
Yep, it's a character here. And that's the filming has been going. The action is when it will be cut. The wind is hitting it, it's not getting cut. Hitting it, it's not getting cut. Hitting it, it's not getting cut. So what is happening here? And now it got cut. Right? At 436, we can see 2 pieces of it. For all this time, it was 1 piece. And there are 5 scenes. One character is wood, another is a duck, another is a moonlight, and so on. So there is no human character, by the way. There are human passers-by as a background in the film. So cut to what I'm trying to say is why I'm labeling it as eco-quantum aesthetics. And if we think of it from Karen Barat's perspective, phenomena are not pre-existing entities observed from a distance, but are co-constituted through specific interactions of matter. And not only matter, observer, and apparatus. 3 things are kind of simultaneously in function in this case. We cannot separate it. And when we cannot separate it, that's what we call diffraction. We cannot separate the entities and matters. And that thereby there is a relational entanglement. There's a time, there's a space, there's a matter involved here. And it's completely how Karen Barat has talked about quantum physics, the role of matter and entanglement. We could see the same reference in this film. And that was very interesting. The first sequence, let's say this driftwood floats on waves carried yet resisting, existing in a state of quantum superimposition. And Barat might call it here and there, an intermediate space where the driftwood is neither fully controlled and nor free. It is an embodiment of entanglement where agency is distributed across water, wood, and time. So the main point is this pattern creates a diffraction, which I'm calling as eco-quantum aesthetics, because it's not a reductionist approach. It's rather looking at it from a core. And when we look at from the core, we discard the identities, the facade. If we look at a matter from a matter perspective, like from the atomic. So going to the atomic level is not a reductionist approach. It's not reducing the identity. It's rather removing the facade that the society and we all, human cognition, formed and constructed and created. That's eco-quantum aesthetics. Moving on. The final one, and I'll end with that, is nonsense aesthetics. And a little bit of clip would help us understand how this nonsense functions. Artist's name is Thijs Bierstekker. 1 minute, fine, thank you. And this is an installation in a public space named Voice of Nature. And you can see how real tree, with AI-driven softwares and screen technology and participation of human beings formed this whole installation. So just have a look at it. It shows real-time data. So that's how it looks like. So bottom line is, in Voice of Nature, this particular one, Bierstekker uses sensors to visualize the tree's heartbeat, converting years of growth into luminous digital rings that pulse in real time. This interplay of data, light, and presence exemplifies what is called sense through exposure. We cannot see those things. It's kind of the imperceptible, the unseen elements, the tree's heartbeat, the way sap flows, the way it forms a ring because of the climate change that has, it's kind of an archive, by the way. Tree is also an archive. So we had a session yesterday, Arboreal, that was also fantastic and addressed these issues. So I'll not go in much details, but we can see tree is becoming a narrator here without human intervention. Human kind of interacts, then it lights up. And then human get a sense of it. And it's an interesting live art performed by the tree. So that was a very good example for me to understand what I cannot sense, but through technology in this case, that I can sense and I can read and I can see how a tree breathes. Another artifact that I have shown in the example, I'll not show it right now, but I can give you the QR code so that you can all have a look at all the artifacts that I'm trying to talk about. So if you scan it, it will take you to the site where I have all my artifacts. If you need to look at other examples, how it functions. So I'll conclude with this. Nonsense aesthetics, as I was talking, it critiques the anthropocentric frameworks that dominate our understanding of nature, because it's a different language. And by translating imperceptible processes, for example, how a tree breathes, into tangible narratives so that I can understand as a human, because I cannot. I have limitations of senses and cognition. These works dismantle the human-centric lens of interpretation. And nonsense aesthetic is not the absence of meaning. It is an invitation to engage through sensory and effective interaction rather than imposed rational closure. If you have scanned it.
No, I haven't.
Oh, sure. So my final takeaways from this tree is how human can engage with ecological crisis with these three aesthetic lenses that I shared. And not responsibility, but I'll break the word, responsibility lies not in escaping, but in dwelling with it, with the problem that we're talking about. Even if we can't do anything, we can escape it. So that's where comes staying with it. And when we're staying with it, as Dana Haraway pointed out, the word is from symbiosis, which is coexistence, shifted to symbiosis, because a poetic approach is needed to see these kind of imaginations and perceive it. And that's where I'll end. Thank you so much.
Thank you.